A country can change direction in a single moment. Not always through a speech, a vote, or an official announcement, but sometimes through a voice that was never supposed to be public. Last night, South Africans did not just watch television, they leaned forward. When a senior police official played what he described as a private WhatsApp audio involving the president and a controversial businessman, it stopped being gossip. It turned into a national moment, where power, trust, and accountability suddenly collided in the same space. What surfaced on that broadcast went far beyond one recording or one individual. It opened deeper questions. Who really talks to whom behind closed doors? How does influence actually move through the corridors of power? And what happens when conversations meant to stay private are suddenly exposed to the entire country? Before anyone rushes to conclusions, the reality is that the full impact is still unfolding. This needs to be considered carefully. When private communications involving national leadership reach the public, what matters most, the content, the person who released it, or the reason it was released at all? Context matters, and in South Africa, context shapes everything. The audio was not presented with dramatic flair or sensational editing. It was framed as something the public had a right to hear. That framing alone shifted the atmosphere. Audio recordings carry a different kind of power. They reveal tone, pauses, confidence, and familiarity in ways written documents never can. For many viewers, it felt disturbingly personal, almost too close for comfort, making ordinary citizens question whether the system has ever truly been fair. This is not new territory for South Africa. Leaked phone calls and secretly recorded meetings have shaken the country before. Voices often reveal truths that paperwork cannot. At the same time, South Africans also know that recordings can be selective, manipulated, or released for strategic reasons. That tension between exposure and possible agenda is what made last night's moment feel so heavy. The person who made this audio public is not a random figure. Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi is known for being controlled, professional, and cautious. When someone with that reputation speaks openly, especially on live television, people pay attention. Not necessarily because they instantly accept everything as fact, but because they understand the personal and professional risks involved in speaking at all. For many, the question went beyond whether the recording is real. The bigger question was why now? In politics, timing is rarely accidental. South Africa has lived through enough commissions, investigations, and delayed consequences to know that revelations often appear when pressure reaches a breaking point. And then there was the name that shifted the mood in living rooms across the country. Cat Metal. A name surrounded by controversy, whispers, and unanswered questions. That name alone carries weight. When it is even indirectly connected to the presidency, suspicion spreads quickly. Not because guilt is proven, but because trust in power is already fragile. This morning, conversations at taxi ranks were not about technical legal arguments or procedural details. They were simple, direct questions. Why would the president speak to him? What is being hidden from the public? Is this just another scandal that will eventually fade away without consequences? These questions matter because leadership is not judged only in courtrooms or official reports. It is judged in kitchens, workplaces, and communities where people already feel the system does not work in their favor. What made this moment even more powerful was that it happened live. There was no editing, no delay, no chance to soften the message. Live television removes all safety nets, forcing viewers to witness the moment as it is, raw and unfiltered. And raw moments stay in memory much longer than carefully written statements released days later. In situations like this, silence becomes loud. So far, the response from the presidency has been careful and restrained. Some see that as responsibility, others see it as avoidance. In South African politics, silence is never neutral. To supporters, it may signal legal caution. To critics, it looks like fear or damage control. The truth probably sits somewhere in between, but perception itself holds real power. Political authority depends not only on laws and institutions, but on public belief. And belief is shaped by patterns people remember. Citizens think back to past scandals where early denials collapsed under evidence, and also to accusations that disappeared without accountability. That history breeds skepticism. People want clear answers, but they prepare themselves for disappointment. This is where institutions become crucial. Police, prosecutors, and oversight bodies are now being watched closely. If the allegations are serious, due process must take its course. If they are weak or unfounded, that too must be demonstrated transparently. Anything less strengthens the idea that rules change depending on who you are, and ordinary people feel that imbalance first. Trust in leadership does not stay locked inside parliament. It spreads into the economy, public services, and everyday interactions with authority. When trust weakens, compliance drops, engagement fades, and cynicism grows slowly but steadily. A single voice can sometimes reveal more than 1,000 official statements. As this audio continues to circulate, the deeper story may not even be what was said, but what it reveals about access. Who gets to speak to the president, and who does not? And how that reality compares with promises made to millions who feel ignored. No verdict has been issued. No court has ruled. Restraint still matters. But vigilance matters too. Democracy is not only about voting every few years. It lives in moments when citizens demand to see what happens behind the curtain. Another quiet but important question is now taking shape. What happens when allegations reach the very top of the state? Procedure becomes just as important as public anger. Legal steps, thresholds, and safeguards cannot simply be skipped, no matter how intense public emotion becomes. Law moves slower than social media. Lawyers move carefully, weighing every decision, even as public pressure grows louder. Investigators now have to consider jurisdiction, and every option carries consequences that go far beyond a single headline. One wrong step could weaken institutions that are already under pressure, which explains why some officials fall back into caution even as public impatience grows. But caution also has a price. Long periods of silence create space for speculation, and speculation spreads much faster than verified facts. By the time official clarity arrives, public trust may already be damaged. This is not just a political issue, it is a social one. Communities already feel disconnected from systems that are supposed to protect and serve them. History reinforces this feeling. From past commissions to unresolved scandals, South Africans remember being told to wait and often being let down. That memory does not create blind cynicism, but it does create careful skepticism. People listen, but they no longer assume honesty. Inside political circles, patterns begin to shift. Loyalty is tested, alliances are quietly reassessed, and public statements are written, edited, or abandoned altogether. Support becomes subtle, conditional, and temporary. Power does not disappear, it simply moves to different hands. While all of this unfolds, everyday life does not pause. Parents still worry about the safety of their children at school. Small businesses continue to struggle. Communities deal with crime and rising costs. For many people, the frustration is not only about leaked conversations. It is about whether these distractions delay real solutions. Scandals feel heavier when basic survival is already difficult. Trust rarely collapses in one dramatic moment. It erodes quietly. Each unanswered question and every delayed response adds weight. Over time, people stop expecting explanations. Promises lose meaning, and democracy starts to feel more like a routine procedure than a shared responsibility. Yet moments like this also carry potential. They force conversations that power often avoids. They remind leaders that transparency is not optional, it is demanded. Whether this leads to investigations, reforms, or political consequences is still unclear, but one thing is certain: the public is no longer willing to look away. The deeper issue is not just the audio or the names mentioned. It is whether institutions respond in ways that rebuild confidence instead of simply controlling damage. Credibility cannot be restored through silence. At its core, this story is about power, access, and accountability. Until those questions are answered openly and honestly, the discussion will not disappear. Many South Africans remember how the broadcast felt like a mirror, reflecting leadership, institutions, and society itself. Those questions did not end when the screen went dark. They continued at dinner tables and in quiet conversations across communities. Allegations are not convictions, but power without scrutiny creates distance. What people want now is clarity, proper process, communication, and accountability. Without these, uncertainty becomes the most dangerous outcome. Delayed truth comes with a high price. When controversies remain unresolved, the damage spreads, weakening trust in police, justice, and public service. Transparency becomes essential. In a digital world, very little is truly private. The only real protection is consistent ethical behavior. What is said in public must align with what is done in private. Institutions are facing a test of principles, not loyalty. Courage, more than authority, is what restores confidence. Citizens must stay engaged without becoming reckless, demanding answers without abandoning fairness. This story is far from finished. Whether it leads to investigations, reforms, or deeper reckonings depends on the choices made in the days ahead. Those choices must be made openly, legally, and with respect for the people who will live with the consequences. Accountability is not a single moment. It is a continuous process.